I like how when people who've, hung out a bit online but don't really know each other in person, when they finally coalesce into the same space and they're all magicians of some kind, or cunning men of some kind or whatever, like you get 2 hours on average for the pleasantries. And then immediately after that, you are like locked in, mewing, staring at each other, being like, your animal is this, your tree pacts are this. Like, that glimmer in your eye when you looked over there and saw that spirit that I also saw, and we both acknowledged it. You clearly have
Mhm.
this kind of pact, it just unravels.
We have been politely and quietly scrying each other for the last 2 hours, so let's discuss what we've seen.
Politely.
Well, some of us are allegedly quite polite about it and have excellent manners. Others are B-key.
It's true. I'm like, I saw that, and you were pretending that you didn't notice me seeing that. So let's discuss it later.
That's why today's beer is badly behaved.
Badly behaved, atrocious, no good, very,
Oh
very,
man,
very no good. Big bad
bad.
wolf. Yeah.
The bad, bad, no good, very awful day.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
That people are having when I'm like, I have seen your pacts. Do you want to talk about them?
But then absolutely seen a return, and that was my favorite part of like it was funny because like that was the first day we spent together at Caspar, and then like the
Hmm.
next day we hung out, we were all so free and like limber and being like, let's go to like 50 shops and let's and I was like, we were trying to get you this pack of like tarot cards, and I was thinking to myself, okay, next time I see you, I'll bring you a Lenormand deck as well, the Blue Owl
Yeah.
one. But we were like really trying to find one, and oh my God, tarot prices have gone up. And it was just so ridiculous. And then we came across this one cute little vintage store, and you were like, copper needles. Never mind, I got my divining instrument.
And they helped. They worked. They worked like a charm.
Yeah. But that's the thing when you're visiting a country, right? Is you're like the first hour and a half is like strangely exciting and excruciating until you finally are like, oh, libation to the earth, I'm good now. And the land
Mm.
spirits are like, hi, yes.
The headache was legendary, and afterwards it was just like, oh shit, I meant to do this. And then on my way through Philosopher's Walk, I was like, yeah, let's do that now before meeting people. And then within 5 minutes, the headache just ebbed away. So yeah, I'm glad I wasn't. I didn't have to tie myself in knots to uh, to get rid of that.
But you did find a small statue of Mary, and she is indeed
Yes,
good at untying those knots.
she is. She is. That lady would just not give up.
Mhm.
So yeah, but happy to be here and happy to hear you both again and Salt. So it's yeah, yeah. I really had a good time meeting you guys. I didn't expect. I mean, I did expect to have a good time and to meet up once, but I didn't expect to be doing so much sightseeing and having an absolute blast, and even going for tea and wandering around some cemeteries. So yeah, thank you for that.
Oh, it was our pleasure. It was so fun
Mhm.
to hang out in person and get
Hmm.
a lot of like just ambient like scrying practice in as we headed around the city, and I got to kind of show you where I have made done certain things and put
Yes.
my spit and fluids in different walls and different packets and things, and just been an absolute goblin about it. But and of course, vintage stores galore. But I think one of my kind of low-key favorite parts was after we got our mochi donuts and Vietnamese iced coffee. It was just us like hanging out and watching like the spirits move through the sky. And I was watching the way that your court was beginning to plug itself more in to the flow of aerial beings here. And I was watching the same thing happen for the gentleman, and then I was like, oh yeah, like it was just such a peaceful moment where I was like, yes, this is so refreshing to actually hang out with another person who really, really, really actually does magic and doesn't just write about it and
Mhm.
talk about it.
Yeah, no, that's the doing part of the magic has always been the most important part for me, at least, and the most fun.
Mhm.
Although, as I said earlier, is it even magic if it doesn't traumatize you at least a little bit?
It's a sliding scale of a little bit to a lot.
Yeah,
Mhm.
there's that. It's a spectrum.
It's a spectrum indeed, yeah.
No, and because that's one of the things that I always really enjoy with meeting up with people who practice magic. It's the more people you get together, the more stuff happens.
Absolutely, yeah.
So yeah.
Because your spirits have to egg each other on and start testing each other even without your permission or consent or desire necessarily. And then also things you all of your like luck attraction that you've done just that's like Venn diagramming and
Yeah.
suddenly like we're all getting discounts and we're all getting free things and all sorts of cool things are happening to us. So yeah, it was absolutely phenomenal. And hearing you say that actually you listen to our podcast while you're spinning
Yes.
thread, it was like one like the coolest thing anyone's ever said to us because like I love people tell us like, oh, I was doing this, or like I listened to your fox episode on Kitsunetsuki and like I saw a fox or something like that, or people will tell us like I was listening to a Tobone episode and like I came across a bunch of toads. Like it's like cute little synchronicities, but you're like, no, I'm actively like spinning actual thread while listening to your three voices. I don't know, it's very flattering. So I'm so excited to have
Mhm.
you on.
Thank you for asking and having me. No, but and the spinning stuff. It's speaking on that. I actually sourced a bogwood spindle with an amber whirl.
Whoa.
Whoa.
I know.
Ah!
That that is a nice find, and I look forward to seeing what you make with that.
hmm
It's nettle. There's spun nettle.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
All right, we'll be in touch about some of that.
Yeah. Well, all right, we'll be right back. Cut to commercials. We gotta discuss this.
You're not alarmed at the frightful howls which you may hear. It's finger, salt, and bitter bow key.
Ooh, what's that word mean?
Well, I think we're going to have to ask our guest, Caspar, here today for that.
Yeah. Hello. Welcome,
Hi.
welcome. Yeah. All right. What's Beatabo? I Googled it and the image that I associate with the Kludde, like the w winged wolf came up.
Hmm.
The fearful, drowning water spirit. Whatever relationship could this possibly have with Key?
I don't know. No idea. It's a mystery. It's a Dutch folklore mystery.
Yeah, right. Wings,
Yeah.
wolves, and water spirits. Oh my.
Yeah.
It's no, it's related to the kludde. It's yeah, how to translate that? A kinderschrik.
Uh-huh.
And basically to scare kids away from the water. But the image itself, yeah, it's just well, I mean, if the shoe fits, it's a large wolf with wings stepping on a lamb, I think. And yeah, a very frightful water spirit. I mean, you have a few other ones as well that are like her name, it eludes me for now, but she looks like a drowned woman who's completely green. So I think the wolf wins looks wise in this case.
Yeah, stepping on a lamb too. That's quite like it reminds me always of those like saints that are like trampling like a dragon or some kind of other like
Mm,
spirit, right?
Mhm.
yes.
It's a
Yeah.
very evocative overcoming of peace and placation techniques that are normally done, and being like, no, I'm ferocious no matter what. So.
Okay, don't advertise too much.
That's why I said it's a mystery. Let's keep it a mystery.
God. All right, Salt, save us. Give us a little housekeeping. before I pass out.
So, so remember to check us out at twitter.com/frightfulhows. Now we can guarantee there are no lambs being trod on here. We can't guarantee there aren't other things, mostly malign spirits being trod on. You can also check us out at patreon.com/the Frightful House. We have a bonus episode every month curated by and just for our patrons. A Discord server where we have My Almanac, a monthly live occult book club where we discuss a text of your choosing. And we also have show notes for every episode and so much more. And remember to give us a like, a rating, a review on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you might be listening to us. It helps us to fight the demiurge of the algorithm. And also check out our services, key offers, personalized coaching and magic and mediumship, sorcery for hire, readings and custom talismans, oils, tools, whether you want to learn to see spirits or whether you want someone to take care of things on your behalf. Swinger also offers bulk and fathomancy readings, although currently she's booked out until September. So check the website, check your calendars. And I offer astrology, horary, electional, natal, pretty much any kind of astrology, even mundane, and also certain kinds of incense watching. And you can also hit us up on social media. Swinger is found on Instagram at Dragon Cunning. I'm found on Instagram at SaltCNC. And Key is barnow.key. And that's on Instagram. Now, for our illustrious and esteemed guest,
who you can also find on our Patreon only Discord server. Very, very happy to have you on there to always share the wonderful things you're up to as well, Caspar.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be sharing them.
Yeah, we met over Instagram, actually, speaking of the deadly website,
Yes.
And we've been chatting a little bit about the podcast, and we also knew each other to a certain extent. We've heard of each other through our mutual friend Nay. And Nay Nordmans, who's actually going to be doing a course soon at the Salem Witchcraft and Folklore Festival in Salem, Massachusetts, which we're super excited for. And I actually had the pleasure of meeting her recently at the Viridis Festival, and of course we gushed about you and how fun it was to hang out and everything like that. She got us some really great gnome soap, as well as plenty of other goodies. So like you've been on my periphery for a while, and we finally started talking a bit, and then it turned out that you were a fan of the podcast and that you were like surprised and going to be visiting exactly where you live. And Key happened to be visiting at exactly the same time, completely unrelated. So it ended up being perfect that we could all actually meet in person. And I would say that a tremendous friendship was really born and cemented. Have nothing but not doing nothing but praising you to like all my other friends, being like, this guy's the real deal. And I love that you have you can find you on Instagram. Of course you have a private page, right? But
yes,
the Duivelbanner van Overijssel, and you also have an excellent WordPress that is only in Dutch, but I've been managed to, with the knowledge of German that I have, plus in just Google Translate, I've been able to read it, and I honestly, it's absolutely phenomenal stuff. But as somebody who's thought at various times of doing a bilingual blog on Serbian folk magic, I was thinking of doing like every article completely in Serbian and in English. I really respect that it's only in Dutch. Like there are times when I'm like, why am I translating this? And then sometimes I'm just like, I could,
Well, it's funny you mention I adore Nay. She's she's actually one of the first people on Instagram that messaged me like, oh my God, I found your WordPress. It's amazing. And I also told her this, that my first response was like, who is this person and why are they messaging me?
How dare you read what I publish freely for everyone to see? That's me, to be honest.
Well, it's because I didn't expect someone from America to read a Dutch blog, but turns out she can read Dutch. And she also told me, and a few other people have told me, that the Google Translate option on the website is pretty decent. So that is helping. But one of the things why I write on the blog in Dutch is, as we'll get into that further on, Dutch folk magic isn't hot. It's not in. So most Dutch people you'll ask about that, they're like, what do you mean Dutch folk magic? And I'm not saying I'm a kind of pioneer or anything like that. I just like folklore and reading about it and practicing it. But yeah, for me, it was a real big search and an adventure to find the right words and what works in Dutch and what is Dutch folklore. So yeah, it was also born out of a necessity to put everything, my notes together and what I found and what I found useful, but also to make it accessible to other Dutch people and Dutch descending.
Mhm.
I think that's just so valuable because there's obviously, I think English folk magic has been an in thing, and that's had some pretty disastrous consequences at the time. I think personally that I won't go into here, but I
Yeah,
think
sure.
like the work you're doing here, then in that case, like getting, being one of the people like bringing out information on the subject early, right? Like kind of getting these sources together is giving a place for people to learn authentically. Like it's such a valuable service. Seriously.
Thank
Mhm.
you. It's good fun to do.
Yeah, something that the three of us talk about all the time on the podcast, as well as amongst each other, is right now something that's kind of hot or in, is the notion of folk magic. But my question is always, who are your folk?
Yeah,
Is it templates of candle workings and oral charms that you find on the internet or that you find being shared around on like Instagram, for example, or Tumblr or any other social media website, and then you adapt to your practice with the, hopefully inspired visions and input from your spirits, because that's not folk magic, but that is presumably magic that works. I'm not like in
yes.
no way is that a
No,
bad thing. You know what I mean? Like a lot of us learn that way. It's actually great when your spirits are like, pick that book off the shelf, try this
yeah,
thing out, we'll change it this way, we'll modify it. Like there's no shame in that at all. But it's not folk magic, because the folk has
no,
to refer to living lay people who are actively engaging with these methodologies. And
yeah,
so and that's one of the reasons why the three of us advocate so much for learning languages. And especially if you are interested in a culture that either you're descended from but don't know the language of, or you are not descended from but want to initiate into or want to show your respect to the ancestors who have fought hard to maintain these practices, even through religious persecution and serious political upheavals. It is the least you can do, right?
yeah. No,
So
I agree.
So I think that's it's phenomenal stuff, right? When I've given lots of classes on Balkan folk magic, and under my other name, as it were, and something that I always say is like, you'll notice the terminology that I use, it'll betray which part of the country I'm from. And if you know a technique that's different, or if you know a definition of something that's different, it doesn't mean that one of us is right and the other is wrong. It means that this is a living tradition where homonyms, and literal cognates linguistically can also refer to very different phenomena, even if they are incredibly similar in how they're pronounced or seen as synonyms in a dictionary, but they actually are not in practice. And one village to another village over will have more diversity sometimes than one region to another, within the same area. So I think that, showing that as like a living thing that's still being practiced, and also compiling notes and being like, yes, I got some of this from books, and yes, some of this was from oral lore, and yes, some of this is just from spirits told me and it was verified by folklore. Like this has always been the case. We don't have to pretend that there's this long unbroken chain of transmission, because culture transmits in many ways, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. It's I would say that my favorite pieces of folklore and witchcraft and related are is stuff that I broke found in pieces and made my own. It's
Hmm.
if there's experimenting to be had, I prefer to do it myself.
Yeah, absolutely. It's our kind of our motto on the show is like, magic's real, spirits are real, go fucking do it.
And I
And
think
one of
that
the
kind of speaks to the nature of folk magic as well, right? Like there's no particular orthodoxy. It's something that is directly engaged and experienced with, but there's an experiential nature to folk magic and popular magic and all those kinds of practices, like that you kind of can't escape like cold hard rationalization.
Right.
And one of the things as well is, what you are doing idiosyncratically right now might be orthodoxy 50 years from now. Like something that we've often discussed, like among the three and four of us, is like, if you are doing magic in a very situated time and place, like if your folk is your neighbors.
Mm.
If you are doing these things in community, in communion with the people, the place, the spirits of that place, the ancestors of the people of that place, you are contributing to that orthodoxy.
Yeah, yeah. I actually hadn't thought about that. Well, not as much, but yeah, I guess so. It's I well, the thing with about community and the folk or folk magic, I always thought that I needed a working community around me to do this kind of stuff. But then as time went on, I realized, hold up, I've got half my family coming to me. They either want their cards read, they need something healed, they need something blessed. And then I realized, okay, folk or community might not be what you assume it is, but whatever you're working with. And if that is a community of the dead or the living or a combination of both, I mean, what works, works. Why? If you're doing magic and you have a community around you, folk around you, I think it's valid. But
Mhm.
it's a discussion. So sometimes it's being pulled out of context a little bit on in online spaces. That it's like you have to have like an entire village around you, and I'm exaggerating here a little bit, but yeah, community can already be two people.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think that's like one of the really important things, it's not like anyone saying, "Oh, you have to live in a village, you have to,
Mm.
be doing all these things." It's like, I don't know, do you know the names of your neighbors? Are you sitting
Oh
up in your
yes.
wizard tower all day long and doing your own thing, which is all well and good, but if people want to be participating in this matrix of folk magic, as Sfinga very beautifully put earlier, it's like, who are the folk? Like, are
Yeah.
you doing shit for your community, or are you just hanging out? And one of the things as well is like with the internet, like what is a community has become entirely um blurred, shall we say, has become a much broader understanding. Because I'm like, oh yeah,
Yes.
these are the people who I do things for. They come to me when they have problems, and I fix their stuff. And I'm like, cool. I love having my regulars. These are my people, but they might be very far away.
Yeah.
Yeah, or even just like, I mean, I do things on behalf of one of my family's ancestral villages remotely, but I also do so much for the people in the city that I'm in. I don't mean that like, it doesn't, you have to be like a household name, but for the people that you are involved with, who go to you regularly for readings or who know that you can help them with like fertility issues or with determining where their lost items are, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. Like you don't, the point of a living tradition is that it's living with the actual people. So we right now are making folklore through what we're doing, right? And that will be
Mm.
passed on one day as a story about us. And that also includes the multicultural world in which we live in which we meet amazing, cool people on the internet sometimes on social media. And then we form communities and we send each other candles and books and references and things. Like that is also community, right? So it's not to say that like we have to live in these like incredibly idealized styles of living, right? Which themselves, having also lived in a village, like it's not as glamorous as people seem to romanticize it to be, like rural poverty is nothing to necessarily, just kind of like a make into this idyllic cottagecore aesthetic, but at the same time, it is also a beautiful way of life, and as if you can contribute to that for the people where you are, then, and I think about that a lot with translating things for people for whom Serbian is not a language that they speak, but they are interested in these practices or they might have Balkan ancestry. I feel like I'm happy when they get to connect to some of those things, For some stuff, I'll always be like, you should learn the language and because it's possible, but for others, I'm just like, what are the ways that you can kind of bring this wisdom through your ancestors to you right now? And what does it mean to show up for your family and friends and found family, too,
Yeah.
in ways that where your magic also nourishes. It's not just about building some kind of like wizard tower in which you reign supreme, although that is also kind of fun and sexy. But it's also, I think, about like how can you use that to actually empower other people around you. And part of the way that I think we're trying to do that with the podcast is to encourage people to go out and do the damn thing.
Right. No, exactly. It's the Wizard Tower is all good and fun, but
Hmm.
you, you have to start building it from the ground up, and that's where your people are.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I guess I'll start us off a little bit. I have lots of things I want to discuss with you, and I know Keith does as well because he's also really interested in exploring his own Dutch ancestry and the folk magic of those practices that have been preserved in America, where he was born. But my first thing was I'd love if you could tell us a little bit about your name, why Caspar, and why Duivelbanner. What is that, and what is the kind of context from which that name arises?
Okay, well, Duivelbanner is it's an older term in Dutch folklore that the first time I came across, I was like, why don't they just write exorcist? Because when you read about Duivelbanners, they're exorcising ghosts, um, and stuff adjacent to that. And then I delved into it some more, which was just a late night Google search just for fun. And then I was like, the next day, I was like, okay, I need to find more. And we're talking about a good 10 years ago that this happened. And it's not that they are exorcists, Duivelbanners, historically in the Netherlands. It's that they are, um, in Dutch, we would say onttoverdeskundige. A quick translation is magic experts. And they basically have the same skill set as the witch, but they use it for the community that they're in.
Mm.
So if you hit up Nay and you ask her about her favorite Frisian Duivelbanner, be prepared for lots of messages, lots of exclamation marks, and in all things in all cap. But the Duivelbanners were, not to idealize them, they were community figures, but they had, much like the British cunning men and wise women, they had a specific skill set. Some were really good with animals, exercising or healing, or others were great with warts. Others had a thing for um, healing specific ailments. Others were called in for divination. You name it. It's really diverse, and that really opened up Dutch folk magic for me. It led to the first book I read about it. Basically, devil banners and miracle doctors in a specific place in the Netherlands. And unfortunately, the book is only in Dutch. Otherwise, I would have linked it to you, Svinga, to put it in the notes. But the point is with this, there are so many air quote magical experts in the Netherlands in Dutch folklore that I grew up here. I've been born and raised here, and it's I never knew, but that's because it was such a switch in the use of language. So that, like, if you're going to look for witchcraft or witch or the modern terms that we all use these days as practitioners, you're not going to find a lot in Dutch folklore. But if you use older terms like sorcery, and because the older Dutch word for witch is not just witch, it's magic witch. So it's like I really had to make a switch for myself in how I looked at these things and how I approach them. Instead of a modern, like, I'm gonna do magic and that's this ritual and that ritual and a certain terminology for that. But going back to an older, maybe more fairy tale terminology, to put it like that, to make a distinction, then suddenly the whole folklore stuff came to life. It became more accessible, and the more I read about it, the easier it became to find sources. So yeah.
Yeah. I really, one of the things I do really appreciate about the region is, like, there are 50 terms for what people specialize in that get
Yes.
lumped into either magician or witch in translation, right? But it's like,
Yes.
well, I might be this thing which connotates this specific thing, or I remove malefica, I remove illness, I do all these other things, or I make illness, I throw
Mm.
sorcery, I cast sorcery, I gaze sorcery into people.
Yeah, yeah, and one of my favorite ones is the afstrijker. The quick and dirty translation of that would be, oh, that's embarrassing. My English just broke. But um, to
Mood.
rub someone down.
Hmm.
Mhm.
But it's not so much what they do as how they do it. And Dutch is very descriptive when it comes to that. We're very what you see is what you're going to get. So if they see if that person, basically they have the gift of warm hands or healing hands, and that's by rubbing you down with their healing hands. That's how they heal you, and that's
Mhm.
apparently a whole genre of healers within the Netherlands itself. And there might be at other places different names for them, but it
Mhm.
was interesting to learn how also the difference between Protestant areas and Catholic areas, how they deal with those people. And but to make a slight curve back to Svinga's question also about my name, um, the in the Netherlands you have some people might know of him as well, Balthasar's Conjure.
Mhm.
Yeah, he has a YouTube channel and all, and he's gorgeous to look at. But
Oh
he's
man.
also a very, very skilled card reader and a practitioner. And but we have a Balthasar, and in the Wiccan branch in the Netherlands, we also have someone named Melchior. And basically, as a joke-ish kind of thing, I took the name of Caspar. It's like, well, if we already have a public Balthasar and a public Melchior,
I
I will
love
do.
that.
And if you put all three of us in a row, I'm the youngest, so that also fits.
I love that so
Mm.
much. When you first told me that story, I wondered if there was a relation because like with both of us are like I remember going through his like tarot videos and like Lenormand and Oracle
Mm,
card videos and explaining things and I got for a while because I was trying to figure out how much of my magic could I share on with other people because I
mm,
have this tradition that's very secretive and then I have other traditions I practice that have varying degrees of how much I'm permitted to share. So I was like, oh, I'll use things that are like a bit more publicly available and obviously cite my sources, but I'll be like, these are the things that I can actually kind of engage with. So like PGM, for example, some Solomonic things. Like, even though I'm
mm.
not like primarily at all a grimoire magician, like this became something I could share and blog about. And Balthasar's technique of what he calls like Solomonic hoodoo, where he takes his training in root work and then he blends it with the Pentacles and so on, and the planetary hours and the Heptameron, like really appealed to me as something I could actually kind of like post about and experiment with. And
Yes.
so like I wondered when I met you if there was any relation because I was like, it's two Dutch guys. And I didn't know it was a Malkier as well. So that's so fucking funny. I love it. Very cheeky.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm. It's a fantastic cunning man's name, as it were, because it has the descriptor of what you are and what you do, but also is a bit of a jab,
Yeah.
bit of a
How,
jest.
two things at the same time.
Mhm.
Honestly, in many traditions that I'm in, all good names are both affectionate and a jab.
Legit, yeah. One of the interesting things, just as a brief digression, is that I'm really glad you brought up like the phenomena of the healer having hands that have heat. One of the
Mm,
ways that I've heard that in the Americas, because that actually translated in kind of a complete way into America, as I'm familiar
sure.
with it, which is that certain explicitly Protestant faith healing traditions, the anyone can be a healer with the caveat that they are able to um, ways I've heard it phrased are make the hands warm or give the hands life or to give them like heat in the context of like a living body is still warm. And so the ability to heal proceeds from this same ability to, literally put life force into the hands and transfer it to others. So it's kind of a fun parallel. Just to see.
Yeah, no, I didn't know that, but that it translated so well into the Americas as well. But no, that's fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Funnily enough, one of the places I first heard this was coming out of Holland, Michigan, and specifically like the Dutch-speaking diaspora there.
Really?
Yeah, so quite literally 1-to-1. It just came on over here, and people kept doing their thing.
It's I haven't looked into that specific part of healing that much because simply I didn't find that much sources. But how would you also expect someone who doesn't necessarily have the wording to phrase what is happening to put that onto paper? So I'm not surprised, but I'm very pleased to hear that.
Mm-hmm.
That it reminds me of the Pennsylvania Dutch.
Yeah. Very similar stuff going on there.
Yeah, and that little sentence they say before they try anything, I will try. So it's not a
Mm-hmm.
guarantee. It's a good attempt at doing something with the healing hands. That's beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things that I've always liked about the kind of Dutch and broader Germanic magics in the diaspora is
Mm.
that the terms that are used to describe these people in translation are like the doers, I guess, the triers, the bringers in the case of like the bracherai,
Yeah,
like a macharai, things like this.
no,
And
definitely.
I love
Mhm.
that. We even have the same thing in my culture and language because like chini, like to throw a chini, chini is like something like literally it does something, like to make something, to make it happen. And then also like chini mise is like it seems to me, like it
Mhm.
appears to me, right? So it's all these like even like bayalitza or bayenye and being like, oh, what are you bayeling about basically? It's like what are you inventing? What are you oral charming? Like it's like a mischief and it's also fake, just a kind of charlatanry to it. But then it's also like, well, what are you actively like making or creating in the way that like God also speaks and creates, right, through words and through actions.
Yeah.
Mhm. One of my favorite things that you've kind of spoken about before as well in the podcast is like the Bialitza is not just the charm, but also the person who does the charming.
Yeah, absolutely. In some dialects, that is the
Mm.
name that is used, right?
Hmm.
Just so many. Like it's to the point that like, it's not like there's like a genus and then a species, right? There's just literally so many people and names and titles for things. And of course, it's very regional, but it also I do like the connection of always like the power and the person with the gift, right?
Hmm.
Mm.
Which I think is interesting that you were saying that this term that you're using has this connection to exorcism, and being able to unmagic to like de-magic to like depower magic. It's very obviously Marian, I would always think of Mary because I'm a big mom, I love you, but it's that unweaving, I love Cyprian Justina, right? And Justina is the one who that undoes the magic that Cyprian does, and she unweaves it, right? So it's this power to understand, to be able to cure it, you have to know how to cause it, right? Is always the
Yeah.
implication for us. So
Hmm.
it's one of those things that like the person that's famous for demagicking or depowering, amulets and seeking them out and having a vision of being like, oh, the curse was put under this tree and you like, you dig it up and there's like a fetish there or some kind of, like bar of soap with a bunch of pins in it and that kind of thing. Like to know how to undo it, you have to know how to actually cause it too, right? So like the best healer is the one who knows how to throw the meanest curse. So
Hmm.
there's an element there. The Exorcist also we talked about this I think in our second episode that Salt you led, which is the relationship between exorcism and conjuration is almost identical in its mechanics and also in its root vocabulary, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's always, there's the inclusion of legal terms and clauses, even. there's also, you know, the elements of prayer and inheritance of authority, whether that's from lineages or deities or spiritual guardians. You know, it kind of depends on the flavor of the region. But yeah, I think that's one of the interesting things, right? Is that sometimes the distinction is predominantly, I think, Caspar, you really kind of emphasized this earlier on, like the social element, right? Like when you were talking about the distinction between a practitioner of witchcraft and an anti-magic practitioner.
Yeah.
Would
No,
you be
exactly.
willing to expand on that a little?
Of course, in which direction? Um, it's what struck me as particular within the Duivelbanners in the Netherlands is there are a few Duivelbanners that do it all from exorcism to making herbal remedies to divination to basically what modern practitioners do these days. And actually, with the resource, like they usually have one or two grimoires,
Mm-hmm.
the classical grimoires. So they're already lettered people. There is one of my favorite Duivelbanners is Zwarte Kapin, Black Kapin, basically. And her main thing is fertility. And some stories make her out to be a witch, other stories make her out to be a Duivelbanner. And I found that it doesn't really matter because when you go to her grave and you practice grave sitting and you ask her for help, she will. She comes through strong. And especially women with fertility problems, she gets the job done really quickly, and I believe also with the result of twins in some cases. So it's Duivelbanners can be as diverse. Basically, Duivelbanners, as witchcraft goes as well, are as diverse as the needs and wants of the community that they're in.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's a farming community or more agricultural land, there will be more Duivelbanners. Not that every town had a Duivelbanner. They might be 3 towns or 5 towns over. They will be specialized in healing horses or cows from a particular disease. And if you have like a sty in your eye, or you're possessed, or someone put a love spell on you or your husband, or your butter churner isn't working, and the Duivelbanner who specializes in that lives 5 towns over or in the other side of the country, tough luck. You need to go there. Though that said, there are rare cases of Duivelbanners traveling around. Did that answer your question a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing. The it's interesting as well hearing like how people were moving from, you know, specifically to meet with these individuals across villages. Like you said, like there's a distance, I think, that today we don't have so much with access to the internet and everything, but there's something different, very, very different about that kind of, you know, in-person kind of engagement, right? And I understand that's something that you're very keen on emphasizing as well.
Yes. It's the in-person stuff. It just works way better, and this is not meant as any disrespect to people offering online services or group ritual services online. It's just this is what works the best for me.
It's one of the things that I've always really respected about you. And whenever people go to you and are like, "Oh my God, I would love a reading from you," it's like, okay, I live in this town. Come over to my house.
Yes. You know, I love that. You know, people have been very curious about Febomancy, right? You know, and what is it like, oh, what is the bean reading, you know, and stuff like that. And I do offer them online, but some people obviously want to know like who I learned it from. And I was like, well, you know, you could get a reading from my mentor, who was really fucking good. She lives in this village. And she doesn't speak English, but you know, and you know, I mean, in theory, you could WhatsApp her, but like, it's got to be in person. So I really love that.
And then having met her with you, I'm like, yeah,
I know, but she clocked your ass.
Oh my god, yeah.
Clocked. Yeah, she's like, he seems nice, but that boy's an evil fucking witch. Like, and just like clocked all the vampire shit going on, and you were like, yeah. And she's like, no, nice guy though.
Mhm.
Fucked
Nice
up
guy. Don't let
spirits.
him in my garden.
Yeah. No, I was like, he's a botanist. Like his day job is biochemistry. Like he's not gonna fuck anything up intentionally.
Did she let him into the garden eventually?
We
No.
didn't have time, and
Ah,
but that was very funny. And we'll see you next time.
well, remind me to put out a few test plants when Key's around.
Yeah.
Word.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Man, it loves to be tested. Every time we're in any location, I'm like, hey, do this. Or like, hey, there's a spirit that only comes at night. Using oral charms only, make it nighttime, so the spirit will show up.
Mhm.
Like I'm always I feel like I'm giving him the riddles 3 every time because like we go from like hanging out and having a really good time to me suddenly being like, so, if you had to break into this location and you couldn't use your lock picking kit that I know you have on you, how would you open this lock with magic? And then like I just start like whispering these things like an evil like devil on his shoulder, and I'm just like, do it, let's see how you do it. And then obviously he always does it with flying colors because he's fucking good at what he
Oh.
does.
Thank you, thank you.
Respect.
It's the best way I've ever learned magic, so it's having to being given Sfinga's riddles 3 and then figuring out a solution, or you giving me a hint that nudges me in the correct direction. So
That cemetery in New Orleans where I was like, okay, make it nighttime at like
oh my
2
god.
p.m. to make that spirit show up and make it a physical manifestation too. Like make sure that there's like moths and all the other kind of things that show up. Like it took you like a while, but when you got it, you got it. Like
Mhm.
and then I
No,
was
it
like, yeah, I
was
remember that oral charm and that like random like story I told you about in Serbian and I translated for you about how to like blot out the sun. Like there you go, you got it.
yeah, because I was like, oh fuck, which one is it? And then I was like, okay, let me try this one, let me try this one, let me try this one. Then
Mhm.
eventually it landed.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
like,
yeah.
that's the first one I should have done. And you're like, that's right.
Yes. Killed it though.
Thank you, thank you.
But yeah, I'm always so excited to see like when people start presenting on things that are like very specific. Like I use the term Balkan very broadly because to honor the fact that one, I come like my ancestry is from multiple countries. Like I was born in Serbia, but like and my parents are Serbian, but I have Croatian and Hungarian and Bulgarian and Macedonian and Montenegro, everything, you know what I mean?
Sure.
But I wanted to emphasize that there's a lot of similarities. I don't want to just be like, oh, this thing is done here and that to the implication that it's not done anywhere else, right? But
No.
having said that, I always am very quick to be like, here are the languages of access that I have, and here's what I do, and so on and so forth, right? And here's this evidently betrays a particular Serbian source. So I love that your blog is specifically about Dutch folk magic, and not letting it be just something that is seen as like an extension of Germanic traditions, which it's kind of like I hesitate with that sometimes because I see the temptation to be like, oh, linguistically, there's all these roots, right? But then that does not mean in any way that culturally, the magic is expressing itself in a like manner.
No, sure, and it's something I've posted about a few times that it's also in my name. I'm the Duivelbanner van Overijssel, which is one of the northeastern provinces here, and which has always been a mainly agricultural part of the country. So the folk magic here is different than when you go to like Amsterdam or Rotterdam or to Zealand or down south in the Netherlands where the dragons are. Just so you know, Slinga.
Oh,
And
what? No, go back.
no, it's the Netherlands has a surprising low count when it comes to dragon folklore.
Hmm.
But if you move south, where the more towards the province of Limburg, there are stories about dragons,
Hmm.
and it's a more hillside country part of the country, and there are caves, and there was mining going on there as well. And yeah, it's got some good folklore there.
Oh my God, dragons do love a mine. They they do love a good place they can hoard, absolutely.
Yeah, but the Germanic traditions,
hmm
I think, before the dragons got into the conversation. No, it's. I mean, we're talking about the Dutch, the Netherlands here. Of course, there are Germanic roots, language, what linguistically, magically, folklore-wise, history-wise, but and this is some sarcasm, surprise, Germanic stuff these days is divided into what we now know as Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium. So I think that Germanic, in the context that it's used historically, yes, but for modern day, to call Dutch folklore traditions or even German folklore traditions only Germanic would sell everyone short. But
hmm
that's my opinion because modern day people are carrying that tradition with a that's I'm painting with a broad pencil here, but it's yeah, if we include the living in those traditions, the word Germanic just doesn't fit.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's why I'm also, well, not always, but because I do use the tag Dutch folk magic on Instagram. But when I do post about Dutch folk magic, air quote, then I always try to make clear that it's where the piece of folklore comes from,
hmm
what its background is. Like with the evil eye prayer that I geeked out about because in the Netherlands, or here in this part of Europe, evil eye folklore, that is, when I think of that, it's something Italian or Mediterranean. But here, maybe if you had if someone cast evil eye on you, the most Catholic thing that could be said to you, like, "Oh, pray a rosary, it will go away." But there aren't specific charms or prayers for that, at least not that I encountered. And then I found that prayer, and I was like, oh, "This is wonderful."
Yeah, I remember in the post you mentioned that like it wasn't just you who was surprised, it was the author too, where
Yes,
you found it in the text.
yeah, it's my surprise was echoed by uh by this author, and I was very amused by that. It was like, okay, and then I messaged Nay about it, like, did you see this? So yeah, but it's like the Netherlands and Germany have a very long history, and it's obviously the Second World War, and the wars play a role in that as well. What most people do not know is that before the First World War, just as an example here, right? If you studied in a Dutch university and you wanted to go on to get your, and do take me with a grain of salt on this, um, either it's your master's or your PhD, one of the two. If you wanted to do that, you needed to go to Germany, to a German university, because that level of education was not here. The university simply didn't have it. The language spoken in universities in the Netherlands was German. These days it's English, but it just shows how intertwined the Netherlands and Germany were at one point in history. Still are. I mean, this afternoon when me and my partner went out through the Stadspark, there were loads of Germans coming by with their car and their caravan and basically setting up camp here for the holiday. Sorry, that was a poor choice of words, but it's they are sister nations basically,
hmm
and the troubles that were in Germany between the Protestants and the Catholics were mirrored here, but the Protestants had the upper hand, and it's stuff like that that really, if you put that next to each other, it's like, wow, how, even though if you say to a Dutch person like, oh, who speaks dialect, like, oh, it's a lower form of German, they will passionately deny it, that it's German. No, it's Dutch. It's dialect. It's Dutch, but it's anything but German. And to generalize to most Germans, the Netherlands is this funny coastal province with a funny accent.
Yeah. Like we were even joking before the episode began that Plattdeutsch is Dutch in a trench coat masquerading in Hamburg.
Yeah, that was a good one. Yeah, so it's and to get back to the Germanic traditions, I mean, I love the heathenry that is today also here in the Netherlands. It's a thing, and I love how dedicated people are to bringing that specific type of practice or tradition and even magic back to the surface, so to speak. But for me, it's Dutch folk magic, and specifically the niche of Dutch Catholic stuff, which calls me home, which bloody haunts me.
And there's a very interesting Protestant and Catholic divide that you're telling us about in the Netherlands, right? It's is it north-south based?
Ooh, well, I mentally have to conjure up the map of the Netherlands in front of me. But yes, mostly if you have the north side of the country, generally and historically, that is more Protestant. And when you go below like the rivers, more the south of the Netherlands, like the Dragon province that I mentioned, Limburg, that is predominantly Catholic. And the difference in folk magical practices, or they wouldn't have called it magic, of course, but in folk practice is staggering. Like in the Protestant areas, it was predominantly male men that practiced a form of folk healing, much like what Key talked about with prayer and hands and you name it. And once you crossed into Catholic territory, it was mainly women, mothers, aunts, daughters, nieces, and saints. And there was much more leniency with folk practices. So obviously, I'm going to flock to that because, yay, information, data, stuff I can do.
Yeah. Even in like in my own family, right? In the Catholic side, it was always my grandmother, my great grandmother who were like, "Let me pray the rosary for you."
Yes.
But the way that they would phrase it is very fun because it was literally shaking or rattling bones. And I was like,
Yeah.
that's interesting. But they would say, "Let me shake bones for you," and they would go into their room and pray a rosary to God, Jesus, the Virgin Mary, and Saint Anthony,
Yes.
and the problem would be solved. The thing would go away, the item would be found, whatever it may be. But on the Protestant side, it was always the men who were like, okay, let me go into the woods and get the plant that will heal your cut or cure your burn or whatever it may be, and
Right.
kind of know how to lead the family in a prayer over the person to be like, okay, let me, oh, they're sick, they have the flu, they have whatever, in the name of the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit, this person is healed.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it's for both sides of the Christian faith spectrum. There's something to be said. The more matriarch approach on the Catholic side, but the patriarch on the Protestant side, there's also something very comforting about it and supportive in the most positive sense of the word, that it's supportive because I've met a few people from a Protestant background who do it like that. And luckily for them, they were married. Otherwise, I would have been like, okay, you're good at what you're doing. Now I've got to let me cook you some food. And
Yes.
I have an appointment with your knowledge being put into me.
Yes. Well, but it's like I said, the beautiful approach in both directions is something to be said for.
Definitely, right. Like there's a long history of people doing things in that manner from the 1600s with the Protestant Revolution, and taking on that very particular I don't want to say patriarchal, but patriarchal quality. And
Yeah, no, I think that's a better description. It's a quality indeed, and they're emulating what they've been taught, of course, but
Especially with that kind of succession of like each man can be his own interpreter of the Bible. And
Right.
that is, and he becomes the leader, or like the pastor becomes the leader to the community, which the father, the literal patriarch of a clan, perpetuates to his wife and children who follow him, right? And so on. So there is this kind of transmission that way. Whereas it's also fascinating the way we get like the seventh son of the seventh son type folklore, as well as the seventh daughter of a seventh daughter folklore in so many different places, right? It's just this feeling of like what happens when you are able to kind of pass certain things on laterally too, as well as
Sure.
to descent, right? Which we've noticed, every time we've shared about our traditions has always come up as like a very prominent feature, right?
Yeah, yeah, and that's the thing for Dutch folklore. That isn't there. There are no teachers.
Hmm.
So for the good people listening, if someone approaches you and said, I'm a teacher in the Dutch folklore scene," it's bullshit. It really is, because there's no unbroken line. Maybe within families, I don't know. And I'm not the leading expert on this. I'm not an expert at all, just an enthusiast. But like we talked about earlier, there are no unbroken lineages, no traditions that are on surface level that are easily to be found here. And at best, we can cobble together something and make it our own by experimenting and living it. But what you have, Svinga and Key and Salt, with your magical backgrounds, that isn't here in the Netherlands. And in one part, that's a shame, and another part, it gives tremendous freedom to experiment and to experience, and certain taboos or things that you can't discuss or are limited to discuss. Yeah, that just isn't there for me. Not saying that I don't respect that, but more like to make the context clear for the Netherlands for people listening.
Yeah. And I think out of the three of us, actually, I'm the only one with like a teacher in my own culture, like the tradition that I practice. But for Salt and Key, you guys taught yourselves, and also spirits taught you, and which is also very true for me as well. But like I also have the benefit of having a teacher from within my culture and country, whereas all of us have teachers in other traditions we study, right? That initiated us or that gave us license to study those things, and our mentors in those traditions. But like within like one's own culture, not always the easiest to find. It's one of those things I tell people is just like don't glamorize it too much, because you may not like the person who's an expert may not be the person that you actually like or get along with. And your spirits can be very picky. They can be like, I don't want this person having ritual authority over you forever,
Yeah.
I'd rather, we slide into their shrine room and eat everything we can and then vomit it into you over a series of 13 years until you learn what they learn through osmosis in your dreams.
Naturally.
Naturally, yeah.
It's in the town where I'm from, there is someone who works as a warm hand healer, but this person is fundamentally Christian. And the way I am, an openly queer gay man who is interested in folklore, that we've met up once, and it did not go well.
Yeah.
And that was also a lesson for me to not expect people, just because they practice a certain thing, to expect them to be open to everything. Like I said, most Catholic people wouldn't have called it Catholic folk magic. That's the word I use, but they would shy away from that because, oh, no, it's definitely not magic. It's just something we do. It's just something on the side. And that was something I really had to come to terms with.
Yeah, absolutely. Even in Serbia, like some of the really like prominent healers, may openly identify as what they're doing as magic, but in certain areas, but others just as easily will deny it and say, like, this is just God's gift. Like, I am
Yes.
doing things through his grace and through the intercession of the saints, but will be very opposed to even calling it like magic because, we can distinguish things as like cutting person, witch, but then also, as you pointed out, like once that person's died, like people who are doing necromancy with them will hardly see the difference at times, right? Like they do both, they work
Mhm.
both hands. But like in life, there's such a taboo to identify even with magic, not just with witchcraft, right?
Yeah.
Witchcraft obviously has this a very pernicious connotation of killing babies and using malefica and so on and sowing infertility. But then magic can at times be like, oh, it's access to ritual power that is aligned with the dominant hegemonic religion.
Yeah.
And at times it can be like, no, this is the absolutely anti that, And it's funny because the people that I've met that like do things that I would happily classify as like profoundly magical are often the ones that are like extremely Christian and will rebuke such a claim very, very
Yeah.
like intensely, right? And also, unfortunately, will also be more conservative or like I've learned from some people who are absolutely this amazing treasure troves of wisdom and knowledge and folklore. But oh my goodness, is it hard to talk to them about anything else? Everything has to be couched in language that is very xenophobic or very conservative, and that's inevitable, It also just means we're not a good fit necessarily, But Key, when he was with me in the Balkans, had the delightful experience of my methodology when I see someone who has obviously cool stuff around their house is I will buy a wheel of cheese and a bottle of wine and sit on their doorstep for 3 hours until they come out and be like, hi, I want to talk about this, which, shocks some people, but that is actually not terribly uncommon,
Mhm.
especially in more tight-knit communities, right?
Yeah, yeah. Like in the villages we went into, it's like, okay, I know what to do. I have a plan. And, it's exactly that culture of hospitality and knowing how to approach those figures in a way that is respectful within the community, but also, um, shows your chutzpah, shall I say?
Well,
is
I didn't learn how to read beans by being shy. I'll put it that way. You
exactly.
have to kind of put yourself out there sometimes and cold call people on WhatsApp and be like, "Hey, I saw your ad in a newspaper that you read beans. I read beans too. Do you want to talk about it? Can I pay you for an hour of your time and you teach me your method?" And vice versa.
Mhm.
Well,
Yeah,
maybe that has been missing from my approach: a wheel of cheese and a bottle of wine.
yeah.
Ultimate road openers, right?
Mhm. Some of that
There
nettle
you
thread, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yes, the
Yeah.
nettle thread. Ah!
Take some take like 90% mint, 10% nettle to drive the mint along in its auspices of opening the roads and
there you
give
go.
that to people and there you are. But yeah, it's like on a somewhat earlier note, but of um the rejection of what we're doing as magic and sorcery as no, this is just the thing we do. This is just the cultural part of our Christianity, whatever it may be.
Right.
Like like Dutch side of my family, shall we say, has very highly preserved fishing magic because we're
Wow.
all fishermen. Like it's from the time I was practically born until now. It's oh, tie this knot in this lure to catch this fish. Make this offering at the shore. Make this offering in the center of the lake. Make this offering as you're rowing, say this prayer as you pick up the oar for the first time, all these different things. And I'm like, what the fuck are we doing here? Is this juju? And they're like, no, this is just what we do. This is just the
Yeah.
vibe. This is the tradition, the practice. This is how you fish.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Why
cool.
would you even step outside the social contract, Key?
Mhm.
It's those terms are. I mean, I would have the same response like, "What are we doing here? This is magic." And then probably someone will go like, "What do you mean? This is not magic. This is what we do. This is how my father taught me, and how his father taught him." And yeah,
Mhm.
but it reminds me very much of the early days of digging into Dutch folklore, really relearning the vocabulary that fits the folklore, and it then it becomes then it's not suddenly it's not magic anymore, but just something you know and do. Becomes part of
Mhm.
everyday folk and life.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's the even and it's interesting as someone who is, a part-time, if not rapidly becoming full-time
Hmm.
occultist of even when I'm engaged in those practices. Like if I go out to a lake with friends of mine, I'm like, okay, give me your lures, give me your line, fucking get the fuck over here. And tying the knots and breathing certain things into them and saying the prayers. And they're like, what are you doing? And I'm like, this is just how you go fishing now. Like these are the things that are done. So
How else are you going to catch something to take home?
yeah, exactly.
To go fishing, do you use specific knots?
Yes. So one of the ways that I was taught to do it to begin with, which is kind of fun because there's also a integrated progression to this, in terms of like how your manual dexterity improves as you age and as you are capable of learning these different things. Um, but I was taught to tie a certain noose in the knot, right?
Yeah.
And I say noose so loosely. It's a bit of a different kind. It's like a series of half hitches. But for the fellow riggers out there, smile.
I'm gonna come.
But as you as you tie these knots, right? Um, different numbers will correspond to different fish, and when you tie the final loop to tighten the knot down around the hook, you would say a prayer of different kinds. Usually, it was like in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, or it would
Hmm.
be, Hail Mary, full of grace, blah 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 blah, into the knot. And as you bring it down, then you put the line of the water in that will bring the fish. And certain ones also require certain um, offerings to be done to the patron guardian of the lake or to Mary or to God, depending on the fish. Muskie are notoriously insanity inducing, shall we say. Any musky fishermen who have to be listening know what I'm talking about, but you have to make decadent offerings of tobacco with extreme diligence to the patron guardians of the lake to even see any, let alone catch them. And you have to drag the lure with certain knots tied onto it in a figure eight off the prow of the boat next to you when they start to come, and you have to bait them and pray to them and constantly be just muttering oral charms under your breath for them to even bite. And it is the most infuriating thing I've ever done in my entire life because of how hard it is. You're hypnotizing a fish, if you will. But as you kind of participate in these things, it's different knots. And then as time goes on, you learn, oh, here, tie this easier knot, and that will let you catch this easier fish with even more reliability, and going on from there. So,
Well, I didn't realize that fishing was so reliant on magic, but
oh my god, yeah, because every cast is a prayer.
oh, I
When
love
you
that.
Mhm. The way I was told is, whenever you throw the line, pray to God, whatever the prayer may be,
Hmm.
because whether you catch something or not, the prayer is answered. As you pull it back in, the answer will come to you. The product of that prayer will come to you. The omens that can be
Yeah,
augured as that cast is made will come back to you. Um,
beautiful.
as the guardians of the lake will send their messengers to you, and they will say things into your ear as you unhook them, as you choose to either catch them or release them. The prayers you say as you catch the fish, that you bring them into the boat and be like, thank you for sacrificing your life to feed me and my family today.
Yeah,
All of these different things. It's a very meditative art. And even finding mirrors, like in my own folklore, I've heard from uncles of mine tying these different nooses. If you put 12 loops in them, they can call different fish. Anything more than
sure.
like 4, 5, 6, 7 is complicated depending on your skill. But if you go up to 12, they will catch certain things. But if you tie a 13th, they're like, never, ever, ever in your life tie a 13th, because that will Hall of Spirits do. That will call dead people out of the water that have drowned in this lake, and they will come and try to take you into the water, and it will be a problem. But I'm like, that is very cool. I'm going to get familiars in this way. So I tie, 13 knots and throw it
Of
into
course.
the lake or river or into the middle of a crossroads, as famously has been published about in the Trolldom tradition, Scandinavia, where you go on 3 subsequent Thursdays with a fishing rod, cast it into the middle of a crossroads, and on the third Thursday you'll get a tomte or a nissa or whatever equivalent of like a familiar or household spirit you will, and all these different things. And it's a very rich and vibrant spiritual tradition, so we say.
So I hear. So you really made me eat my own words here, didn't you? Because I just said, well, I don't know of any living traditions that are being passed on. It doesn't happen, and here you are.
Mhm. Well, the thing is, it participates in what you said already, right? It's very private and it's kept within
True.
families. It's passed from father to son generally, even father to eldest son, as I've noticed in talking to cousins of mine. The eldest son has the fishing lore, the younger son has the healing lore, the herbal lore.
Yeah, there does seem to be a pattern with that in the Protestant side of the Netherlands with the Duivelbanners or healers. There was this pattern indeed from father to eldest son, or from uncle to oldest nephew, or even from neighbor to oldest boy in the neighborhood. And if they really couldn't find anyone, then one of the women in the family were eligible, so to speak. But it seems to be a natural progression from there. Yeah, but fascinating and very cool that it's in your family and it's something that's being kept alive, even though it's like, no, this is just something how we fish. Doesn't everyone fish like this?
Yeah, genuinely, like it's kind of curious because in the opportunities in my life that I've had to share this with people, it's like confusing, shall we say. They'll be like, "What the fuck are you doing?" And I'm like, this is how everyone does it, like, right? Like no one will be contesting of what I'm doing if I happen to grab your line and tie, 4 loops in it and then breathe the prayer into it, and then all of a sudden you're catching bass all day long. Like, it's just, how it's done.
Yeah.
And I there's a very peculiar alternating generational naming convention on that side as well, where it goes Fisher Baker, Fisher Baker, Fisher Baker. Where people, the fisherman generation will name particular things, the baker generation will name particular things. The Catholic influence in my life has broken that tradition, so shall we say. My name is not Peter IRL, but it kind of it carried on. It goes from there.
Mm-hmm. Key, that was really beautiful. I love listening to you talk about the fishing lore. When we were in the Mediterranean and we had to take a boat at one point to an island, where we were going to stay for a little bit, like hearing, and I had that book from the ethnographic museum I was translating for you, that had all like the sailing lore and like burning the boats for St. Nicholas's Day and so on, and interestingly, like something that I didn't know, actually, here's one of those things, is like that Caspar and I were kind of nerding out about, like after you had left, was like, just because it's from this culture doesn't mean we know it all. Like sometimes, like you have no idea what this, it's a tiny country in Europe, compared to like provinces in Canada or states in the United States, right? But like there's so much diversity, right? So like I was like, oh, I didn't know that they had the equivalent of selkies here, like, in this part of Croatia. Like I didn't know that there were these seal women, because there's only just one species of seal that ever makes it there, And so we were talking, and I was thinking about that, and it's just like, oh, you just start popping off about like knots and sailing lore and stuff like that, and took great pains to differentiate BDSM shibari ones from actual, ones that you would use for sailing, which are obviously much tighter. But it was great to like see you in your element, and I don't know, I want to fish with you one day. I want to see how you do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely love to take you all. And one of my favorite things about that book is the Hagstone lore. of
Yes,
being
yes.
net weights and being like, this is literally identical to lore that I'm familiar with one change. Be like, in this area, this prayer is done to this saint, not this saint. But otherwise, it's completely identical down to the verbiage. And it is beautiful in that way. But it goes back to the point that we kind of opened this episode with, where, what I do in my area, in my village, in my family, even within a given area, is maybe completely different than how someone else does it. But we see that they both work, and because they both work, we're like, okay, we respect it and we understand that we're both talking to spirits.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately the most important part.
Yeah, no, most definitely. I'm still taking it in. It's I mean, you mentioned the knot magic and the fishing magic before, but it's fascinating.
Hmm. I love how many like the emphasis on water spirits, right? We were talking
Mm.
about
Mm.
the Klude and your namesake today, the Bitterval. Um but yeah, there's so many. I mean, thanks to Nay, I've learned quite a bit about the kabouters and the Vitaviven, but like it's so cool to see like the overlap between like uh, sort of what the geography of a land obviously will influence its folklore heavily, because that is part of to me, like when I ask like who is the folk, I always think like, well, the land too, right,
Yeah.
is absolutely engendering in this way. And yeah, it's super cool. Like I don't know, I'm also processing what Key just said. That was really, really awesome.
In the spirit of things connecting, when we talked about the flying charm,
Hmm.
I find it. I've been thinking about this for a bit, but what I find fascinating is that the Dutch flying charm for witches is over street, over house, over forest. Oh no, over tree, over forest, over whatever. And what you explained about the Serbian flying charm, if I have that correct, there's a rhythm and there's a way of chanting it, but it follows the same kind of structure over things, not through things, but over things. And that made me think on how interconnected, not just, I mean, if we're talking about Dutch folklore, we're talking about folklore very specific to my country, but if we're talking about Serbian folklore or British folklore or American folklore, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. Folklore doesn't live in a vacuum. It's always connected. So with Key's family now with Dutch origins, but now living in America, you already have a cultural exchange and mixing going on that preserves stuff that works and then goes on to create something new with it as well.
Hmm. Yeah, we use like not about the thorn, not about the bush, or like not on a stone, not on a tree, not on a bush, or not on the
Yeah,
road, not below, not above the road, not below the road, not on
yeah,
the road, not on the tree, not on the road to name a village adjacent to you, but, or like not on the log, not on the stump, not on the
yeah,
tree, but, and then the but is like, but over the sweeping threshing floor, over the tree that you have a pact with, for example, like over the pear tree of Saint Theodore of Tyron,
yeah,
at the end of the thorn, at the end of the thought of the axe, to the honey threshing floor, over and so on. There's a rhythm to it, but it also projects you, the parts of your spirit that are flying out when you're doing magic. Like it like quite literally like throws you, right?
Mm.
and we all end up in the bishop's cellar.
Yes, I love that. I love that in the Dutch charm it ends with in the bishop's cellar to steal his power and his authority.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's I love how connected folklore is with each other actually. And meeting with people like you yourselves, yeah, it's always that nice moment of awareness for that.
Absolutely. And we make our new folk, our new communities that way too.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Hmm.
But talking about kabouters, what you mentioned earlier, if you
Hmm.
that is more Nay's territory, but like the kabouters here in the Netherlands are fascinating creatures. they even have a king to how they are approached and standard fairy lore basically never say thank you. It's funny how that is connected to everything, like British folklore with the brownies and whatnot.
Totally. I'm also especially interested in like maybe as we're kind of nearing the end of the episode, if you could speak a little bit about like wherever you feel like taking it, do you want to talk about types of spirits or some common techniques of curing or breaking curses or moving curses in the eye and so on, or like what does it mean to give it, or do you want to get or that plus a bit of spinning and weaving, because that's one of the things that whenever I see that wheel of yours, I just swoon. Which maybe we'll figure out what the graphic for the episode will be, but like I'm totally down to make it that too.
Well, who knows? But no, maybe it's fun to name a few spirits, because you've already talked about the Wittewifen. Wittewifen is a difficult term to translate because white wives doesn't really sound that nice in English. And some sources say that they're the spirits of deceased witches. Others say that they're fairies. Others say that they are ancient heathen priestesses. And for one, I can say that they have a fucking horrible sense of humor. Because they delight in scaring you, and the more scared you are, the funnier they are. The more fun they have. A particular night that I was riding my bike back at home during the witching hour, and suddenly I was enveloped in mist, and I was like, I can see where this is going. I'm not liking it. So I'm going to stop, and I'm going to stop here by the lantern post just for the light. And the next moment, the lantern post went out. And then you're standing there in the dark, and obviously I'm quite accustomed to hearing animals out in the wild during the night, but I heard different sounds, like human sounds, like breathing and someone walking. And I was like, this is an open field next to a stream. If there's anyone walking here during the dead of night, I'm in trouble. And and then I drove off on my bike as quick as I could, and then I heard multiple women laugh, but not just a polite laugh, but a full-on cackle. And I was like, okay, I've been had. But they also the Wittewifen are connected to Fae. They're connected to spinning. There is this story of a handsome young farmhand who wants to marry the rich farmer's daughter. But in order to do so, the rich farmer sets a challenge that he has to do something heroic. I forgot the details of the story, but it comes down to him throwing a arrowhead into a pit where the Wittewifen reside. And while he throws it in, he says, he basically challenges them, like, I can throw this at you and hitting you, but you can't land a hit on me. And of course, the moment that the arrowhead lands, the Wittewifen rise up, they hiss like snakes, and they follow him, and his horse is faster than light. And by the time he gets back to the barn and he crosses the threshold, one of the Wittewifen angrily throws the arrowhead back at him, but it misses him. And the next morning, or that same night, I don't remember, he's like, I'm still alive, so I can marry the rich farmer's daughter. And then he finds the arrowhead that had turned to solid gold. So they're a little bit mysterious. They serve as figureheads to certain parts of the witchcraft community in the Netherlands, but they are also wonderful folkloric beings that are greatly ambiguous to what they are, which only adds to the mystery, if you ask me.
Mm-hmm.
And but once you get establish a good line of communication with them, they're great, but always be on your guard a little bit. Never take them for granted,
Wat heb
lest
je
you.
kunt zien als nooit vergeten.
Nee, nooit vergeten. Never forget. It's but in the hills where Witte Wieven are rumored to live, there have been digs by archaeologists that they found remnants of spindles or stuff like that. So it's fascinating stuff. And one of my favorite spirits are fire spirits in the Netherlands, but a particular kind that um, also has connection with the second sight. So
Mhm.
there's an old word for that, or name for second sight, that's called voorloop. I'm not sure how to translate it, but it's if I have to do it quickly, it's basically preview
Oh,
and
pre-knowing.
pre-knowing, yes. And this if there's like a house fire to happen, this spirit will show up, a human figured spirit will show up and basically walk through your house and set the whole thing on fire in astral perception or whatever. But they can also do it as a if there has been a house fire, so you are notified of it. And there are all these complicated names for it they suggest that there's a lot more going on, and that older Dutch communities had a broader working knowledge about stuff like second sight, because there are so many names for it. And that's like a cute glimpse into like what could be there, not just second sight wise, but also practice wise.
Certain fire spirits, right, in the Protestant lore, like they have kind of their own understanding, their own being, their own Lucifer-ness, plural.
Yeah.
But yeah, I find that there's a bit of a reflection in the Catholic side of things where Saint Judas will step into that role of fiery being, those plural Lucifers that we so love. But Saint Judas will find himself walking in the world of the living from Monday to Friday and being like, "Hi, I am among you. I have not yet betrayed Jesus." And in that capacity, being the icy, cold wind that will bite you when you are upon the open ocean, when you are sailing, when you are fishing, when you are out on the sea. But on Saturday and Sunday, being this fiery, infernal being that is like, I have found myself in hell. What's good? And so being on fire and stoking that upon the earth. So as take this figure in composite, in the legend of like Saint Brendan the Navigator, for example, you find Saint Judas as half fire, half ice, right down the
Cool.
middle.
That's so cool. And I think there's an interesting parallel to like some of the ideas of like creation beginning with a world of fire and a world of ice, right? And then like the friction between
Certainly.
them. Yeah.
Yeah. World of
I love
Fire, World
that.
of Ice.
Yeah,
The
I love the idea that like, oh, there's a time in the historiole, right, of like the oral charm in which Judas has not yet betrayed Christ and using that power versus what happens afterwards.
yeah, and it's a very interesting inversion of other traditions, right? Like the pre betrayal is cold,
Hmm.
and the post betrayal is hot, versus other traditions where the world of the living, this world is considered to be warm and vibrant and inviting and heating in that way, and the world
Hmm.
of dead is freezing. Like it's a very stark contrast even to other Germanic lore, of
Mm.
being hell, one L, that is icy cold, barren, devoid of life. So it's fun and unique, in my opinion, Dutch specific expression in which it differentiates itself from the German lore, its understandings.
Yeah, most certainly.
Hmm.
I'm just trying to envision the same half ice, half fire.
It's Mr. Mr. Icy Hot.
Yeah.
Yeah. There, okay. So for the listeners, I've been working on like a course, if you will, which it still needs some work before it goes live, but about the Judas stuff there. And the recommendation of Tiger Balm or Icy Hot has been avoiding my grasp, but oh God, do I want to put it in?
I know you're so tempted. You're like, okay, what if Icy Hot gets in there? I mean, listen, Vicks Vapor Rub, right? Hugely folk magical
Yeah.
ingredient, right? In Mexico. Why not? But I also understand.
I'm like, I've never heard this being used in the time and place, so I'll avoid it. But like, I'm not gonna pretend that I don't have training in Afro-Brazilian traditions. So I'm gonna throw in the Vicks. I'm gonna throw in the Tiger Bomb. I'm gonna throw in the camphor.
Whatever
And have fun
works.
with
Whatever
it.
works indeed. Awesome. I think one of my just as a little throwaway, one of the speaking of like Dutch folk magic that's actually influenced to me, I was kind of blown away to find out that like the CMB, speaking of your name, right? Like Caspar, Melchior, and Balthazar over the door with like the date of the year being done on
Yeah.
Epiphany, that in some places coming out of Dutch tradition, the C is actually Catherine, the M is Margaret, and the B is Barbara.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
yeah, when I learned that, I was over the moon because I was just like, oh my God, like that is so cool. I found that out thanks to a book that my godfather, Jesse Hathaway Diaz, showed me, called, I think it was North Sea Water in My Veins.
Oh, I've heard
Yeah,
about
yeah,
that
yeah.
one. Yes.
Yeah, it's by Imelda Almqvist. It's fascinating stuff, and it had like it's all about like pre-Christian magic in the Low Countries, but like one of the
Mm.
things that like comes up is like yes, this it's these three female saints that visit instead on Epiphany. And so, in theory you could totally do Catherine as the Wheel of Fortune, Margaret as the devil because she's obviously Marina of Antioch, she beats him with a hammer, and then you
Of
could do
course.
Barbara as a tower, right? So
Yeah.
people come to your house, they'll be like, wow, these are some pretty stark omens you have over your door. Like, are you trying to invite some bad shit into your life? And it's like, no, you don't understand. There's a blessed chalk on these. It's for something else entirely.
But to have the Wheel of Fortune, the hammer, and the tower, those are some pretty powerful images.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Especially because like I love Mia Marseille deck, right? So like the devil
Mm.
and the tower and the Wheel of Fortune, like they look so good over the door. With the 20, and then 24, for example, for this year. Yeah, it's super. I was very happy to learn this because Margaret, especially Marina, is my homegirl. She and I are she's always driving, co-pilot with me. So I was happy to have her in the center. But yeah, that's something that, hugely influenced me from there. And of course, with you, Caspar, like nerding out about weaving and spinning. I think just the shit you can do while you're idly doing, the things you can mutter, the things you can put on the thread, the things you can weave into it, like what it means to like participate in that fate making process or make the literal ropes that you can like or cords that you can then use to bind other things or to loosen other things. I think there's something incredibly special. I have a huge soft spot for Marion Tyre of Knots. Just as like I actually found a medal to her completely randomly. Like I never bought one.
Mm.
It just literally manifested, you know what I mean, into my house. And I was
Yeah.
kind of like, what the hell is this? I never bought this, and I don't have a lot of like Catholic medallions, but like she's always been someone I associate heavily with Saint Justina as well,
Well,
in her story. But
oh,
yeah.
all I can say is, Svinga, be careful because that's how Mary gets you.
I know, and I already have a Troje Ručice. I
Yeah.
only have like I already have the three-handed Mary. I have various Marys. I have lots of icons, and they just keep collecting themselves.
Yep. Yeah.
And I have a whole thing where like the icons are not Pokemon cards. If you have one in your house, you have to celebrate that feast. You should
Yeah.
be take care into who you invite. But then, boy, did they invite themselves.
No, I tried putting off working with Mary for so many years,
Mm.
and once I did, I mean, the not to be rude, but the icon is nice and flat. You can put that on the wall.
She's an
Try ha
icon.
She's an icon.
She's a legend. She is the moment. But
Is
try
she
ha
rat summer coated?
the statues. I mean, I'll show you pictures of my saint's altar, and statues just kept coming. Like I didn't even have to lift a finger for them. They were being delivered by my door by friends, family, people who didn't want the saint statues in their house anymore.
Hmm.
And at one point, I was like, okay, enough slices, enough saints. Please don't. Someone save me. And after a polite candle and a prayer to Mary, it stopped.
Hmm.
But every time I walk past, like the Russian supermarket I went to earlier today, I saw
Hmm.
the Mary icons, and I was like, okay, I best keep 3 meters away from that display because once I get in their sphere of influence, their gravity field, it's done.
It's like
It's
he's fish hooks.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
It's pretty nuts. Having taken you to various different Orthodox countries, monasteries and things, like when you saw how intense the shops are and how you can get your favorite saint on literally everything, including spoons,
Mhm.
it's something. You're like, oh, that for the incense. Oh my goodness. Oh, Christopher and Cyprian of
yep,
Antioch and Justine of Antioch. Oh,
Yeah.
and it's like, oh, like
The most intense church shops were definitely Cyprian and Justina, plus literally any other saint imaginable.
yeah.
And also Lazarus and any other saint imaginable.
Lazarus and Larnaca. Oh my
Oh
God.
my god.
I was so close to like breaking my budget there. But there for the grace of God. And it's funny because as you say, they have a habit of collecting themselves. And that's one of those things that's you're quite right to point out with icons you need a wall, but with statues you need real estate.
yes,
Yeah. One of my favorites was still the Theodore Tryon
Yes.
mm,
shrine that you took me to, and I was like, I have been an inch away from mounting like 5 different things from the time we stepped out of the property, and you're like, let me make that harder for you, and I'm like, I love you so much.
I'm not sorry for doing the salutes and songs that I did at that monastery with Theodore of Tiran's relics and body. Um, that you were that close to mounting is your problem, not
Mhm.
mine. But also, all jokes aside, it was a great time, and I'm glad we got a few special things there, and the monks are really nice.
mm.
Mhm. I was like,
Mhm.
I don't want to scare your redacted.
My redacted, but you can say my uncle, it's fine.
Yeah, I don't want to scare your aunt and uncle over there.
Yeah. They've seen worse.
Real.
But that's I think I really want to thank you, Caspar, for this lovely conversation. This whole time, uh,
You're
I've just been
welcome.
thinking about how lovely it is to just on the one hand compare very openly and honestly, like, oh, here's where I got this from. This is from a book. This is from a friend. This is from like oral lore that I found out about, and then also just kind of like educate each other on things. I think the moment on the fishing, Keith, it's very beautiful to see what happens in the diaspora,
Mhm.
because when
Yes,
sometimes we like, I don't know, I'm very hung up on like what's going on in my home country, but I don't live there anymore. And so it's one of those things that like examining communities that have emigrated, right? And the in some ways the way that they very ferociously hold on to and preserve certain kinds of things, right, is really special too. And it shows that like the folk moves, right? Yes, the land
exactly.
is important, but they also the land also responds and the people respond to new land. And so there's something really special about being like, oh, I did, I hope to meet people who what they will be like, I didn't know that you had guys had done that or preserved this or changed this in this way in this area where there happens to be like a diaspora population, I don't know, but also as Keith said, right, it's very secretive too, and it's very within families. So I feel really privileged to have heard you both share. I know Salt and I are probably going to be texting back and forth furiously as soon as this episode ends about all the cool stuff that came up because yeah, it's a true pleasure to listen to you both. And I'm so grateful to have you on, Caspar. Thank you again.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been my pleasure, and it's not every day that I get to geek out with people about folk magic. So yeah, win-win.
Win-win.
Yeah, so honestly, it's been great.
No, and the spinning and the weaving part, there might be a new spinning wheel on the horizon, but don't tell my family I said that.
Well, you know what? We'll have you back on in no time, I'm sure, to make that an entire topic one day, because I'd love to do some comparisons as well between the ways that our cultures do things.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, I believe it's time for our song, right? Caspar, you had one to suggest for the Akashic Records playlist.
Yes. Actually, I had two from the same band, but I went for this one. Hey Ho on the Devil's Back from Katzenjammer. And my personal favorite from them, Cherry Pie.
Cherry Pie. Also, I'll put both on the playlist. It's on Spotify, the Akashic Records that are Frightful Howls. You can also get a link at withcunningandcommand.com/podcast. And mine is from the movie that came out this year in 2024. That's Dutch, Witte Wieven, which is their title song by Sebastian Romero and Hayat Salim. Because, oh my goodness, is it haunting? Yeah. And speaking of charms that surprised both Caspar and the author of the book in which he found it, our license to depart is that wonderful Against the Evil Eye charm that was from Belgium, right?
Right, from Zomegem.
Yeah. Well, I will leave the honors of reciting it to you, my good friend.
Well, first I need a name, because...
yes. Okay. So who are we exercising? Who are we moving the eye from?
Well, the podcast?
The podcast. Oh, I hope. I hope our awards.
Oh, fantastic!
Yeah, you know what? Fuck yes, do it. Let's do it. Frightful Howls. I was like, yo, how are our awards doing, boys? Quick award check, mic check, sound check. Looking pretty good, but yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
Hell yeah, we're exercising the podcast.
Het kwade oog heeft de Frightful House bevangen. In vlees en bloed is het blijven hangen. Maar wat mensen niet vermogen, zal thans door Gods wel gedogen. Belezen of bezworen, verzwinden weer in naam des Vaders, in naam des Zoon en in naam des Heilige Geestes. Amen. I'm sorry, Spingo. Did we break your computer screen again?
No, but you're both banned and sentenced to horny jail.